We've had some issues in our family, particularly with mental health. That's become a focus for us, where for my wife and I, we can use our wealth perhaps to make a difference in getting some answers for mental health, particularly for young people, which I think is it's an enormous problem.
My friend Jonathan has chosen to remain anonymous in exchange for stepping outside his comfort zone. And that he did. 8 years ago, he began a gradual exit from his incredibly successful bootstrapped company. This strategic approach had an unexpected benefit. It smoothed his post-exit transition, making it more manageable, both emotionally and financially. His search for a new purpose, a lengthy and confusing path for most of us, became clear and compelling after his family was hit by a mental health issue. In this interview, Jonathan shares raw, unconventional wisdom about the advantages of bootstrapping and exiting in stages, and how painful personal challenges gave him a new purpose and source of fulfillment. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Anastasia. Lovely to be here.
So you and I have known each other for a few years now. And one of the many reasons why I value our friendship so much is because you have this unique kind of wisdom, which is rooted in kindness and acceptance of reality and people generally. I don't think I've ever heard you speak poorly about anyone or judging people. And that wisdom is also coming from a wealth of experience. From the professional or business standpoint, you actually lived, 3 lives now?
Yes, yeah. I'm on career number 3. I always hope there might be a 4th career in me, and quite possibly there might be.
I'm sure about that. So tell me a bit more about your 2 careers before you became an entrepreneur.
My first career was I trained in medicine as a doctor, and I went through the training, graduated, spent about 2.5 years working as a junior doctor in the UK, and that was a great experience because you're given a lot of responsibility at a very early age, and it's kind of sink or swim, and I can go into why I changed careers, but I then went to business school and then became an investment banker, was involved in always in one industry, the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries, and had a good time for most of that. But after a while, I had enough and I wanted to do something much more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. So what exactly motivated you to start?
To start my business?
Yeah,
a new
to
business.
Start a new business.
I think that I'm just not very good with hierarchy. I think I probably had a bit of a problem at school with authority. I went into medicine and I found that, the student life was great. I liked it. I liked the practical side. But when I when I graduated, I had to start working in a very hierarchical system. I just I didn't find many role models. I really only found a role model right at the very end when I decided to go to business school.
Yeah.
It was a different system, a different culture in those days. We're talking, I graduated 45 years ago, so we're talking, the world has changed a lot since then, and it was quite a misogynistic, racist culture in the medical profession, the UK medical profession, and I didn't like it, and I just felt I wanted to get out.
How important money was for your decision to start a business or financial freedom?
That's a really good question, actually, because money it's so complex the way it sort of infiltrates one's psyche. I would like to say it wasn't very important, but it probably was, because in fact I had one attempt at starting a business before I went into investment banking. When I was at business school, I wanted to start a biotechnology company, and I don't think money entered my head at all. Actually, it just sort of it was just a sort of great adventure to start a business. And I quickly realized that actually money was really important. And that's what took me into investment banking, so that I could understand what money was about and how you could use it and how you could how it could make things happen. And I got a good grounding in that in investment banking. And I think when I left investment banking, I suppose I wouldn't like to say I developed expensive taste, because I hadn't. I was still single in those days. But I think it was probably quite important, but it wasn't the most important thing by any means.
Tell me about the company you built.
It was a data business. It served and it's still in existence. It served the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries and the kind of ecosystem around that industry. So consultants, investment bankers, investors, they all became customers, clients. And it was, if in a nutshell, I guess what we were trying to do was to become the Bloomberg of the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. So it was, we collected and aggregated all of the information that people in those industries needed to make really important strategic decisions, whether it was decisions around allocating capital to new products, to acquisitions, to investments, or to advisors who were advising these companies. And I started it with my brother-in-law, and we bootstrapped the operation. We tried to raise institutional money. We got this was during the dot-com boom. I think we were probably about the only business that failed to raise money in the dot-com boom. Obviously, I didn't know how to sell a concept, and in fact, it was the best thing that could have happened to us, because we didn't take institutional money. We bootstrapped it, and gradually, over a long period of time, and it was hard. It was really hard. It gathered momentum and became successful.
Why do you think you failed to raise money?
Perhaps I didn't articulate it quite well enough. I think that the whole climate was all about, dot-com and crazy. It was, the internet was just taking off, and it wasn't crazy enough, really. It was too, there wasn't an understanding about the importance of data. And at the time, the attitude was, when we put it in front of investors, well, everybody's got all the information they need. And I would say, no, they haven't actually. It's really hard to get it. It's all over the place. It's not aggregated. It's not usable. You can't make decisions quickly. But they just didn't get it. And it was, oh well, you'll just sell to a few of your mates in drug companies or in the investment banks, and then once you've sold to a few, you've maxed out, and where's the growth? And what they didn't understand was that when you sell a service into a very large company, if you start very small, you can grow it. So you can grow contracts to be multi-million-dollar contracts over a period of time. They just did not get that.
They missed it.
Yes.
Yeah. So their loss. Their loss.
Yeah, I like to think so. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was quite gratified, actually. One of the investment houses that turned us down, we thought we'd had a recommendation that from their analysts to invest. They turned us down. It was quite gratifying to see a few years later they went bust. And in fact, the other thing, we had a series of bad luck, actually. We were about to sign a term sheet on the September the 11th, 2001.
Oh, wow.
And of course, the whole thing blew up in New York, and the market just crashed. And so I had to remortgage my house for about the third time. And my wife was 7 months pregnant. But that was all the fun.
So in the hindsight, it sounds like you're happy you bootstrapped.
I'm very happy with it, very happy. It's not for everyone. I wouldn't recommend it. It requires a lot of resilience.
So why are you happy you bootstrapped?
Because we ended up, as a family, we ended up as majority shareholders.
Yeah.
We ended up having majority ownership of a business that became very valuable. And also, it gave us freedom. We weren't under pressure to sell.
Yeah.
And it was just fun. It was just, once the business got going, it was fantastic. The business was just growing like a weed. We were opening offices in the US, on the East Coast, on the West Coast. We had teams in India. We had offices in the Far East, and it was just fantastic. I loved it, actually, absolutely loved it. And of course, because we were my brother-in-law and my family and we were the majority owners. We could choose who we wanted to work with, and it was all about people, actually.
Yeah. I can very much relate to that, because we had a similar situation in the first business. We also basically walked away from fundraising and then ended up bootstrapping through the exit.
Yes.
And what I heard quite a bit from other people later is when somebody owns a company for a long period of time, say over 10 years, and it's bootstrapped, they assume it's because it took so long, because it was so hard to do it without outside money. And I think your case, because you owned your company for 24 years before you completely exited, and also in my case, it's almost the opposite. It actually, there was no rush to sell, right? So it's a good thing, and people think that it's not, right? Because you're just saying, you had so much fun, you didn't want to sell.
Yeah,
investors push us to sell earlier because they have
do.
A different incentive system.
Yes, they do. They've got a much shorter time horizon. I'll come on to talk about that. But just to go back to the bootstrapping, the hard part was I wasn't making any money. So I went from, I think it was 7 years from leaving investment banking. I did a year at London Business School and then started the business. I went 7 years without earning a penny. At the same time, I was having to fund. So I'd made a little nest egg from my investment banking days, and I was having to fund, a company, and it was hard not having. And of course, you don't know when the sales are going to kick in. Of course, we had our sales projections are always way too optimistic. They always are. So I would always pencil in that, by such and such a date, I'm going to be able to pay myself a salary, and it never happened. So it took 2 or 3 times longer than I expected, and that was hard, particularly with with children on the way.
Of course. So when you started having money, did it all come as a windfall? Or
no,
it was gradual?
It came gradually. But once we paid the first salary check after about 2002, it was. I remember September 2002. That was a really big day. I was on the payroll, and it wasn't very much actually. But we never looked back. Actually, we never looked back then. And also, the business got to the point where I was able to get a little bit of bank debt, and that helped. And everything from then on, the business just grew. It just grew and grew and grew. Every year, didn't matter what happened. We had the Lehman crisis. We just grew. We just grew through everything. And
so you started,
because it's a great industry I was selling into.
Of course. So you started taking money out of the business.
Yeah, I mean, I was never the highest paid employee. I always made sure that other people, people who had really valuable sales skills in particular, and other skills, were better paid. But I think around about 2010, 2012, we started to pay a dividend, and so I started to get about every 2 years I get a good dividend check, and so we started to be comfortable. So after years of saving and having to batten down the hatches, we had a comfortable life.
The reason I'm digging into this is because on this podcast, we focus on what happens after an exit.
Yes.
And my observation is that it makes a huge difference whether your wealth comes suddenly and you're not prepared for it, or you are eased into it over time.
Well, I mean, I would say that it did come suddenly. When the sequence of events. In 2016, we did a minority exit, so we sold 40% of the company to a private equity firm, and so suddenly you had a windfall, and suddenly I felt, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this? But I was prepared for it because we'd been preparing for 3 or 4 years, and in fact, I've been preparing for longer, and I. Although I didn't want to exit, I had to recognise that you don't go on forever. I was in my mid-50s, and I had to prepare. I kind of took a judgment call that by the time I got to 60, I needed to step back and let somebody else take the responsibility. And certainly as the business got much bigger and it got into, as we had several hundred, we had a few hundred employees, it was a big responsibility. I would kind of worry that somebody might do something terrible in America or something like that, and I'd be the responsible person, and I get hauled off to jail in America or something. You just don't know. You don't know what's around the corner. So so I would worry about the responsibility, and I've just felt I need to share this with other owners who've got big shoulders, and because I was getting to a point where I didn't have the capacity to work as hard as I had, let's say, in my 40s when I started the business.
You were talking about why you exited, and you mentioned a high level of stress because you were tired of the responsibility and you were thinking of potential risks which you would not want to face alone, right? And then you were talking about your own energy, that it was going down completely to when you comparing to when you started the business.
Yes.
Was there anything else? Because I would love to hear why you decided to exit, even though the business was doing so well.
I just took this view, as I said, when I was in my sort of mid-50s, that when I got to 60, I would have been doing the business for 20 years, and I just said to everybody, something's got to happen. Something's going to happen. Not sure what it is. And we'd also reached, I think there were several reasons. We'd also reached a size where I was having to recruit people with really quite serious kind of corporate expertise and experience. And it's difficult to recruit individuals like that if they're not actually, if you can't demonstrate that there's a pathway for them to be well rewarded. And the obvious way to do that is to say there's going to be an exit, and give them shares or share options, and that's the way that they can participate from the value that they're creating. So that was very important, that piece. I think also I just had a desire to, although the dividend checks were very nice and we were getting good, had a comfortable lifestyle by then. I'd spent 20 years building this business, and I just thought, it could just go in, some disaster could happen. And
you had a lot to lose by then.
There's a lot to lose,
all
and I want to take,
for
my kids, for my family, I want to take some money off the table.
Yeah.
So the partial exit route, rather than selling to a trade buyer in one go, and the business was still growing at 20%, and I wanted to participate in that. So it seemed to me the best way to do that was either to float on the stock market, and I thought, no, I'm never going to do that, because having worked in investment banking, I see what a treadmill that is. Never going to do that. So private equity seemed to be the way to go, and I'm pleased with that decision. It's because with each transaction I've been able to sell down a little bit more. And we're still owners, part owners of the business, but it's now a very small percentage. So it's quite complex, all the reasons.
How did you handle this diminished control over the business?
It all depends on how much you own. I mean, if you don't have a majority ownership position, you can't control it completely. Yeah. But if we ended up with, as a family, I think, after the first exit, we ended up with about 40%. I was chairman of the business. I was with the private equity partners, and I call them partners. I would say that it was different, but it was fine. I mean, we did have a falling out, and then we made up again, and there was a time when I think they were quite annoyed with me, and they shut me out of their offices, but that was fine. It was, we made up, and we became very good friends, and they were helpful. So it was just a different experience. And
so if we just focus on that experience, you working with private equity when you still had 40% of the business, what would you say the most important lessons you've learned from that?
You have to let go. Actually, you can't. If you go from majority to a minority shareholder, you're not in control. You've got to accept that that things have shifted, and lean into it. So hopefully, if you go down that route, you will pick a partner who really brings something to the table. I think it would have been, in our case, if we had brought in a partner who all they brought in was just capital, and and they had no understanding of the business, and they wanted to do things in a particular way that didn't make sense, that would have been really difficult. So, I took a long time to select a firm that I felt could really add value, and they did. They added a lot of value. We were able to do things that we wouldn't have been able to done at pace. And they also taught me some good disciplines, actually.
So it was a good learning experience for you.
It was
end.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so you basically then continued your strategy of gradually leaving the business.
Yes.
Driven probably by financial reasons at that point, right? You were looking for the right moment to exit.
Well, no, the thing is, because we had done a partial exit, part of the the deal was that they had to have an exit within 5 years.
Okay.
So I signed up to that. Maybe I could have gone with a private equity partner that had a more kind of evergreen type fund, or had but I think in general, any financial institutional investor is going to want to
predictability.
They want to have a pathway to exit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wasn't keen to exit at all, but I'd signed up to it. I had to do that. And so we had an exit, and at that time it was during COVID. I think I was 60. Was it 2020? Yeah, I was 65. So you're kind of thinking, well, I'm not going to go on forever. I need to take. Now's the time to take more money off the table. And I've forgotten to say that the time, going back to the first exit, the timing was absolutely right, because within almost the moment I signed the deal, this was in 2016, I developed a heart condition, and I had to have treatment for that. I had to have stents put in, and the rehabilitation, the recouping of that, I lost focus. So if we hadn't done that exit in 2016, it would have been really difficult to have been the majority owner, and to have lost focus because of illness.
Sounds like you had intuition about it, because you repeated several times that you were boring about something, right?
Yes.
And then you exited. So
well, maybe the worry contributed to it. Maybe not. I don't know. It was probably a long-standing condition that had been accumulating. Yeah. But it's an age thing. As we get older, we have to accept that we lose capability.
Do you ever regret exiting?
No, absolutely not. No.
Was the right decision?
I mean, I started business late. I started at 40 and became an entrepreneur at 40. Yeah. You just have to accept that you're not going to go on forever. And
some people prefer to work forever. Look at
Warren
Buffett.
Some people are amazing. I mean, I come across people who are in their 80s who are still running big organizations, and they what I've noticed with them, with family businesses, is that they've been able to pass on the responsibility to family members, to their kids. Well, I wasn't able to do that because my kids were still young, and also it wasn't the type of business really to pass on to kids. It's there's too much technology, too much. There's just too much going on. It's not something for young kids or even kids in their 20s really to be running.
So what you consider exit is 2020, when you stopped being actually involved in the business, right? Because you still own a bit of the business. You started exiting financially earlier than that. Is that correct?
I was involved in the business up until 2020 as chairman.
Yeah.
Then we did a majority exit, so we sold down to less than 25% from memory. But I stayed on the board because we still had, as a family, we still had a significant shareholding. Then a year later, the private equity firm turned around to me and said, we want to merge with a business in the US. I didn't know much about it, but they persuaded me it was a good deal. But that was also private equity owned as well. So as a result of that merger, as a family, our percentage fell to a much smaller percentage. So I came off the board. And in fact, I wanted to come off the board. I didn't want to stay on the board any longer.
So that's when emotionally you exited. I'm
Emotionally,
trying to find that moment when,
yeah.
for you personally, you were like, okay, I'm out.
Well, we remained invested, although I came off the board. And so I'm still emotionally a little bit in there, but not much. And I keep in touch with the individuals. So it's been a gentle runway down, running down. And for me, it's worked. It may not work for others.
So if we go back to that moment when you felt you exited, how did you feel about it back then?
I suppose I'd become accustomed to. I'd had 6 years of going from a majority shareholder, chairman, to large shareholder, then to small shareholder. So I'd had a period of time to acclimatise, to adjust to that, and that really worked actually.
You're happy you did it that
way.
Well,
I found other things other things to occupy me, and in some ways, things that it was just basically life took over. One of the things I've discovered is that as you get older, as you retire, the decisions don't stop; they keep coming at you, and they involve family, and they're every bit as difficult as business decisions. In fact, many ways more difficult.
Because we're also not prepared for it.
You're
right?
not prepared
we have
for it,
no training for those things.
And of course, it's frustrating that you perhaps don't have enough time to do things for yourself, but that's fine. So I've had plenty of time to change direction and adjust to it, and we've had some, we've had some issues in our family, particularly with mental health, which I won't go into if you don't mind, but that's become a focus for us. Where we want to, as my wife and I, we hope that we can do something. We can use our wealth perhaps to make a difference in getting some answers for mental health, particularly for young people, which I think is it's an enormous problem at the moment.
Do you feel it gives you a sense of purpose?
Yes, that definitely does. Yes.
So that would probably explain why you don't necessarily miss your business, because one of the main reasons people miss their businesses is because it takes a while to find a sense of purpose. And in your case, it came to you in the form of a challenging situation, but you ended up accepting it as your purpose.
Yes. I mean, one of the things we did was after the first exit was we made quite a big donation, a sizable donation to the medical school where I trained, and I wanted to do that actually because I wanted to give back, and we funded some PhD students because we were supporting the next generation of. The idea was to support the next generation of researchers. You see, I mean, my business had been founded on, data, and we had been we had used the output of academic research on an industrial scale. So we had extracted data from medical academic research to create solutions for pharmaceutical companies. So although I'd never been a medical researcher myself, I felt that I kind of developed an awareness that solutions to many of the world's problems, not just in medicine but in everything, are deeply rooted in high quality academic research, and it's a really important endeavor, I think, to support. If you don't, there's only a finite amount of money going into to bringing people into early stage careers in academic research, and so it's like a tap. If it's the more you turn it on, the more people will come in, the more research that will be done. So through that experience, we've developed. I've become familiar with some of the issues in academia and how we can support it, and that's given us that's taken us into focusing a little bit more now on mental health and how we can find solutions to some of the issues in mental health.
So do you plan to give it any structure in the future, your purpose in mental health? Like having your own...
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on that, still trying to work out how best to do that.
There are two schools of thought, right?
Yeah.
There are professionals who feel very strongly about bringing children in as early as possible and actually training them to manage money early on, to get used to it.
Yes.
That's sort of their arguments. And then the other school of thought, where I believe most entrepreneurs belong naturally, is this focus on motivation and drive and hunger, and making sure kids don't get spoiled. So it sounds like you belong in.
Well, I think I do, and the
reason.
I think the first group would, particularly if it's inherited family wealth, or if you've had wealth from an early age or early in your career, it's been around you all the time. In our case, it was something that came right at the end of my career. So they didn't grow up as I mean, they were privileged, obviously, in many ways, but partly because of where we lived in the countryside, but they weren't. They didn't grow up with a sense of entitlement, I hope. So it's something that's happened to us recently.
So if you advising someone who has little kids and they just had the financial windfall, where would you recommend they go? Which direction? Bringing children into the wealth training early, or keeping them hungry?
I mean, my kids weren't particularly comfortable actually with the idea that there was family wealth. Actually, it was something that I think they felt set them apart a bit. I think it depends perhaps on the kind of life that you're leading. We weren't living in London. We weren't living in a particularly affluent area of the country. We were just trying to be normal, actually. So I think for us, I think it's the right thing to delay, but that's probably not right for everyone.
So you're saying it depends on the family.
I think so,
and their circumstances. Yeah, I agree, absolutely. But there are discussions about that all the time, and I can just see that most exited founders in our community, they lean towards keeping children hungry, even if they're very young when money comes. And even if parents want to enjoy their money fully, they're usually very, very worried about this entitlement problem.
I think they should be worried, actually, and I think that the environment of teenagers and young people now is so different from when I was growing up. With all this, well, it's been so well written about and discussed, what's happening in social media and phones, and I can see that whole generation have been deeply affected by it.
So I know you well enough by now to know that you're not particularly interested in material possessions, and you were just also confirming that. Where do you think it comes from, and is it something you're proud of, or is it something you feel is a burden you would rather get?
Well, it's both. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm completely disinterested in material possessions. I mean, we have a very nice, we have a nice home, but I've never had a problem wherever I've lived in, whether it's been a very modest place, and I've lived in some, I would say, more than modest, some pretty appalling places in my time. It's never made it, and I've lived in some really nice places. It's not really been an issue at all for me. Where does that come from? I don't know. Maybe going. My own background is we were brought up in modest circumstances. We weren't poor by any means, but it was modest. I was sent to boarding school. My grandfather funded that. That was it was a kind of militaristic, quite Spartan lifestyle. I travelled a lot in my late teens and early 20s, really roughed it.
Yeah.
So I was comfortable in those situations. For me, it's always, I think the joy in life comes from interaction with people, actually, other people.
I had a discussion about this issue with someone last week who had a very different opinion, and that person came from a very, very poor background.
Yeah.
And he believes that it's extremely important to train that poverty mindset out of yourself.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting.
And he was saying, what's the point getting wealth if you never allow yourself to be rich? So it was very interesting for me to hear, how you would argue against that.
I think ultimately, because the experiences you can have from wealth, being wealthy, fundamentally, I think they can breed a sense of dissatisfaction. When you have a very pleasant experience that's cost a lot of money, it's nice, but how do you improve on that? And if you do it frequently, after a while you could become jaded. And so for me, experiences that I derive the most satisfaction from, it's interactions with people. It's obviously travel it's fun, to see new things, to experience new things, but ultimately I think it has to be the experiences I think you have with people that are more satisfying, and I don't think you can buy those experiences.
Okay, so how do you go about choosing whom you surround yourself with?
I have a family around me. I see a lot of my kids, but also some of our, as I've mentioned, we have some issues with mental health in our family, so that sometimes it's quite difficult to separate from that. But I'm fortunate that because of the varied things I've done, I've got a rich network of people who I've known for a long time. So one of the joys actually recently has been reconnecting with a lot of my classmates from medical school, and now most of us have retired. We've got time on our hands. Before we had all such busy careers, we never saw each other, and now we have a very active sort of WhatsApp group, and we see each other a lot, and that's a joy. And then I have business school. I have people I used to work with in investment banking who I see, and then also latterly there's a kind of quite a big alumni group of people who worked at Evaluate and who I'm in contact with, and then of course the people in the community I live in. So I'm really lucky actually with to have so many relationships.
So you mentioned basically two different sources of satisfaction or fulfillment in your life. One is the purpose of supporting academic research, particularly in mental health, because it's close to your heart. And the second one is this high quality interactions with people that are important.
And there's a third one also. I think as you get to the age that I'm at, you need to look after yourself. So you need to spend time doing something physical. So I've rediscovered squash, for example. I used to play squash in my 20s and 30s. I've taken it up again. I've really enjoyed that. Doing physical things.
So it brings you joy and energy.
And it's gonna stand you in good stead as you get older.
Of course. So knowing that you are helping yourself, being healthy also helps.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you would say helps you feel your life is fuller and
being outdoors?
Meaning with nature.
Yeah, I mean, I always said that, all of my career, I've had 3 careers, they've all been indoors. I also hope that my 4th career would be outdoors.
Okay.
Well, I haven't really quite figured out what that career is.
It doesn't have to be a career, right?
Yeah, maybe it never.
Walking.
Yeah, maybe it never has to be. But walking has been after I had the heart issue, I would go walking every day without fail for 2 or 3 hours, and that restored me. That was very restorative. I can't recommend walking highly enough, actually.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too, so I totally understand. Yeah, I also I think my most creative, best ideas always come when I'm outdoors, walking, enjoying nature.
Yes.
There's some magic that happens.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I'm curious if you're doing anything deliberately to process your life's experience into some kind of principles or mental models.
For myself or for other people?
For any reasons, like, for example, if you think, like, what lessons I learned from this or that, or the wisdom gems I discovered.
I accepted an honorary degree from my university last year, which was I could have just gone up and shaken hands and taken the degree, but they wanted me to make a little speech. So I had to make a little speech to the graduates. They were all undergraduates who were graduating, and obviously you have to give them some words of wisdom. And I think I'm just trying to think back what I said. I kind of said that things that had worked for me were. You don't have to follow any particular path that's set for you by, let's say, a career. Do your own thing. Be disruptive. Be start an insurgency if you must. Because I remember early in my 20s, I'd been kind of a little bit inspired by the doctors, the naughty doctors, who'd gone off-piste and had become sort of Marxist revolutionaries or opera impresarios. And there are a few famous examples of doctors who'd become writers. And so I said, look, it's okay to be to want to overturn the established order, become an insurgent. But if it fails, one of the lessons that I had learnt was that in my first effort at entrepreneurship, it fail quickly, so you can move on to the next thing. And take pleasure. I talked about a secret sauce. Develop all your skills. Develop the unique offering that is yourself. Wrap around it all the skills that you can, and then you've got something unique, and I would call that your secret sauce.
Yeah.
And then just take delight from what happens. And I talked also about unsung heroes, because in my life, the people who have helped me, and perhaps have they perhaps didn't get the limelight, and particularly, within the company I started, so many people were fantastically helpful. I call them the unsung heroes who celebrate and recognize them. And you'll be surprised at the results, how fantastic they might be.
In what sense? In terms of how you feel, or in terms of what comes back to your life?
Both. I talked about, at Evaluate, I used to. It was a little bit like my first child. That every at the beginning you had these sleepless nights. You were exhausted beyond your ability. You thought, how am I going to cope? But you would make these little small steps. Like a baby, these little small steps would produce a result. You might get a customer would be delighted with the outcome, and that used to create delight.
Yeah.
So all of these little small experience of delight, they came, like a child growing as the business grew. It was just successive experience of delight, and of course there are times when people are being naughty, and you have to deal with that as well.
Of course.
And then you would have, and then at the end there was a big step, like an exit or whatever, big things that would be absolutely thrilling. And also the way you look after the people you work for. I mean, everybody in our company had share options. So everybody on two exits that I was involved in, they received significant sums of money, and that was just a sheer pleasure, actually.
Because you felt you contributed.
Yes.
To their happiness, to their lives.
Yes. Yeah, and
I can see how it would give you a lot of satisfaction about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, without doubt. I mean, the more you give, the more you get back. So, I mean, I think if you want to encapsulate,
how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, with the people I know and have known, I hope with love and affection. Am I going to be remembered once they've all gone? Probably not, but that doesn't bother me. The reality is, being in business is not like you're not like an artist. I mean, it is a creative process. It's a very creative.
You are an artist.
It's creative, absolutely. Starting a business and developing it, but who gets remembered? I mean, it's people who create great works of art and who else? Not many other people do get remembered, do they? After a period of time.
But the question is how you want to be remembered.
How I want to be remembered.
Not whether you'll be remembered or not.
Well, I think I've answered that. I think with
love and affection.
Yeah,
that's the most important thing for you. Beautiful. I love it. Wonderful answer. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you for opening up and sharing all these stories and the wisdoms. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you.